So in today's Warthunder video, by popular demand, we're going to be going over all of these 6-7 vehicles whenever it comes to Warthunder, or their weak spots, what is different about them, like what is their actual speciality and how to identify them. And then also in the future, because it's also been heavily requested, we're going to be looking at all of these 7-7 vehicles in a future video. So this video is basically going to be if a 5-7 vehicle sees a 6-7 up tier. And then the next video, which I'll be making as soon as this video comes out, is a vehicle at 6-7 that sees a 7-7 up tier. So that's the only difference between these. We're going to be looking at every single vehicle whenever it comes to 6-7, going over them of their weak spots and also just their differences. And we're going to be using nation-specific vehicles. Like for example, for America, we're going to be using the Tiger H1, this is just the Tiger which has the funky skin on it. And then for like Germany, for example, we're probably use something like the M36 with their 90mm cannon on it, just so you can see what vehicles would be at like a 5-7 BR and then get a 6-7 up tier. So this video is completely just going to be about weak spots and how to identify them. There are some things that I did change on this because some people said they want to see a more realistic combat range. So we're going to be at 100 meters each time that we shoot at these vehicles now. So it should be a little bit better to see. It's going to be like a realistic engagement range, I would say, that you'll see most of these vehicles in. So let's get on to the video and start off with the Pershing, which is the M26. So before we start shooting all the Pershings, I do want to note this right here is that the round that we're going to be using is the one that can actually overpressure compared to the one which is the one that has a little bit more penetration. I prefer the one that can overpressure just because the lethality, for me at least, is more important than like, what is it, like 10 millimeters more of pen. You have like 165 to 153. So I'm personally in vote of using this round, and that's what I'm going to be basing all these weak spots on for at least the Tiger, which is that you just need a penetrating hit. If you can get a penetrating hit with this round, majority of the time it will just overpressure tank that you're shooting at, which is what we're going to try to do within this video. Now, one thing I do want to know right here is that all of these vehicles right here are Pershing. So you have the M26, you have the T26, you have the M26 T99, you have the M26 E1, and then you also have the T26 E1-1, which is the Super Pershing. All of these vehicles are just slightly different from each other. Like this one is probably the most similar to this one, just you have the rockets. But they do have minor differences, which I think is very much warranted to actually just go over and to compare them in general. So the first vehicle here is the M26, and to be quite honest with you, the M26 is pretty much designed to stop the 88. Like every single bit of these tanks right here can stop an 88 from the front. So it's going to be one of the hardest things to do is actually find penetrating hits. For me at least, whenever I'm this far away from a Pershing and they can see me, I like to go for this little bitty area on the left side of the turret right there, which would be able to pin, and then once it pins, it overpressures and you're able to destroy it. Now, you can do this for each one of these Pershings except for this one right here. So this one, that weak spot is the same. This one, the weak spot's the same. That one's also the same, and then we'll review this one a little bit, but it's also very much the same. This one right here is probably one of the hardest Pershings to actually destroy, which is the T26 E5, just because it is so hard to actually just get this little bitty weak spot that you have to hit. So for me at least, what I prefer to do whenever it comes to shooting at T26 E5, especially in a vehicle that I know just can't automatically just pin them and they have good penetration, is shoot the gun out. Every single time, that's what I would do for the T26 E5, because even though this does have a weak spot that you can go for, which is about right in here, I'm not even sure if it's going to pin, it is very hard to get around to actually go into that area to actually destroy them. So for me at least, whenever I'm in a up tier in like a 5-7, I try my best to get the gun away from a T26 E5, and we'll destroy this one so you can know how to determine it's T26 E5. But it's very hard even from this range right here of where I'm actually able to even get around into it. Like I'm trying, dispersion is a thing. It's very hard to get one to just even go in there. Like I need to get just a slight bit lower. So for me at least, that's what I would do. I would try your best to just get this tank to where you do not have its capability of shooting back. So the easiest way to determine that you're actually fighting a T26 E5 is the actual gun mantlet. Look at the gun mantlet right there, and if it's not destroyed yet, you will see like a cloth covering of it, which means that you're actually facing a stronger tank. You can also tell from the turret cheeks themselves are a little bit stronger, so you can't actually shoot there as well. So this tank is probably one of the tanks that you'll have the most trouble with actually killing. It's one of the vehicles that I even have trouble killing just because of that weak spot right there that we kept shooting for. It's so small to even try to hit, and just little bitty micro adjustments is like what you need to destroy this vehicle. And by the time you've already shot it like 2 or 3 times, you'll most likely be shot back. So for me, just go for the gun. If you can't get that weak spot, shoot the tracks out so they can't move or something like that. and then go for the side of the tank, which is a way easier spot to hit. But yeah, most of the other Persians right here that we have for America, the weak spot is the exact same. If you can get this like left side of the turret, which that one's just a little bit poor, we need a little bit more of a thing. But if you can get that left side of the turret, it's most of the time just to kill if it bends, which for me at least is a really good way to just go for. You can go for the MG port, and I say that as in someone that I would never directly go for it every single time, because the MG port for me at least is a very trolly subject of shooting at these tanks. Sometimes you can have what just happened right there, and sometimes you can have that. So I personally, if I'm going to go for the MG port, I want to hit as low as I can whenever it comes to this, like right in there, so I'll make sure it can pin. So that's for me at least whenever it comes to Persians in the Tiger. But now let's look at the Super Persian, which is completely different armor wise compared to these other vehicles. If you don't know what this one is, it's the M26E1. It has the same gun as a Super Persian, but it has the same armor as just a regular Persian. That's all you really need to know about the M26E1. But the T26E1-1 is a vehicle that has add-on armor. So this frontal plate right there is completely just off balance for anything that's not HEDFS or APDS. The ways that I would abuse this tank is I would go for the exact same weak spots as I went on the regular Persians, which is just right here. Tiger 2s, Tiger H1s, Panthers, everything, IS-2s, T-34-85s, they all can pin this area right in here, which is the weak spot of all of these Super Persians. So that's what I would go for. You can technically go for the MG port right here, but once again, like I said, it's not as a reliable spot as some people make it out to believe, which for a lot of people is something that I would kind of not want to go for, just because the turret ring itself is more reliable, and even if they're hold down, the turret ring right there basically will show itself each time. So that's for me at least what I do to all the Persians whenever it comes to Warthunder. The T-2065 is definitely the toughest one to take out, just because of the weak spot itself being super small. But yeah, that is the Persians of Warthunder. All right, so now we're looking at the T-34, T-30, and as well as the T-29. I understand the T-29 is a 7.0 vehicle, but it is quite like important to know the differences between these vehicles. So the T-34 has a 120mm cannon, the T-30 has a 155, and then the T-29 has a 105mm cannon. The thing that you really need to know about them is that they all look basically the same, but there's some differences that you can see if like the vehicle itself isn't bushed up. They all look the same. Like, it's kind of hard to determine them from like a distance of which ones they are. But if you have a vehicle which is not bushed up, like most people bush up their stuff, but if you find yourself facing one of these vehicles that are not bushed up, here's some key things that you can look for to see which tank they are. So the T-30, if you look at the top right there, there's like little bolts that you can see. The T-34 does not have that, and as well as the T-29 has this little bolt. The other differences that you can see is by the MG ports. The T-34 has 2, the T-30 only has a 150 cal right there in the turret itself, and then the T-29, which we really can't see right here, will move up a little bit, but the T-29 also has 2. So if you only see one MG port, that means that it's a T-30, which means if this tank shoots, it means that the reload is extremely long. So that's something to note about these vehicles, and maybe a way to engage them and fight them. But it is one of those things to know how to do that, but also the better part about it is actually how do you pin these vehicles. So if you're a 5.7 like a Tiger, I would probably say to you that most of the time what you need to do is to shoot the gun out. That is the number one thing that I would say to do, and then you can go for weak spots, because the weak spots once again are very hard to hit. It's just like the T-2065, to where they're so small, especially from like a range of even like 100 meters right here. I would not trust my first shot of actually hitting these weak spots and actually destroying the T-34s and the T-29s and T-30s. So gun them out, maybe track them so they can't move, and then what I would do is either try to get on the side of them, or you want to go for a shot right here, which is the MG port. If you can get that shot right there with a Tiger H1 or any of the 5.7 vehicles, most of the time it will pin, it will do a ton of damage, and then you're able to take out the vehicle. But every other spot for the T-34s, T-29s, T-30s, I would probably say is off bounds for anything that is not a 6.7 vehicle, because like even if you try to go for turret ring, the turret ring itself is really strong. If you try to go for the cupola on the top, it can work. Like I have had it work before, but like it's definitely not one that works all the time. And then you do have the little spot. I'll probably show it once we get into the 90mm, but you do have that spot right there if you can have like a decently good pinning gun, like the 90mm for the Jackson or the Persians or anything like that. You can shoot right there and then naturally pin in a turret. But that's what I would do. I would just gun breach these guys, get them where they can't shoot you, and then if you can, get a shot right there, and it should pin every single time, and it should nuke them. So that's how you take on any of the T-30s, T-29s, or the T-34s. Alright, so now we just have the oddity vehicles whenever it comes to the American tech tree for 6.7. We have the M6A2E1, which is just an M6 with a 105mm cannon. That's the same as that cannon as the T-29. It's a very, very powerful vehicle, but it's very, very easy to take out, which is why it's a battle rating of 6.7 instead of 7.0 like the T-29. The way that you take this vehicle out is that you see these little angled parts right there. You may be like, dog, that is like going to be a terrible spot. It's angled. It definitely would just ricochet every single time. Yep, sure did ricochet. Yep, it sure is angled, ain't it? Just don't shoot for this frontal plate. You may say, well, if that worked, then this like frontal plate's going to be easy to kill. No, it isn't. You just want to go directly for either this side or this side, and every single time that it will pin, it will just nuke this tank. That is a weak spot on the M6, the T1E1s. It's a weak spot that you will see a ton, and it will just nuke this vehicle. I've played this vehicle so much, just no one knows how to kill this thing because you rarely ever see it. But if you see any of these spots right there, just shoot for those, and it's an easy kill. Now, you may say, dog, what about if they're actually hold down? And yes, hold down, these things can actually be very, very good. But you have this spot right here on the very, very tip top of the left side of the turret, which if you can get it to pin, that's just a bad spot. But if you can get it to pin, which this next one should, you will be able to pin it, and you will be able to just nuke this thing. So that's the other spot for this vehicle that you can pin if you have one that's apparently just hold down and you can't kill it. So yeah, M6A1E2, while it is a very, very, very potent vehicle, it's very easy to take out. So I have realized right here that I made a mistake. I forgot the T92 got moved up in battle rating to 7.0 instead of 6.7, but it's a T92, has heat FS, has Sabo. It's pretty easy to take out. The only thing that you really have to know about it is that right there, if you can shoot right there, it can accidentally not kill the tank. But most of the time, just shoot towards like the right side, and it'll go through and it'll just nuke everybody. So the engine can stop some rounds. That's the only thing that you really have to know about it. But yeah, it's a T92. The next one here is a vehicle that I would personally say a lot of people get confused about, and they try to shoot it and then they mess up. So like, yes, you can shoot it, hit the breach, and it like destroys everything, but you can also just do this. Like, it doesn't even require a round to destroy this vehicle. And personally, for me at least, I would save a round loaded for an actual vehicle you may need to shoot instead of throwing a round into this thing and then having a reload, because your MGs can just kill it. That's all you gotta do is just take the right side, there's this little window, shoot the dude in the window, and then go to the right, and then shoot that dude that's on the side. That's all you have to do for the Scorpion. It's a very, very easy vehicle to kill, and I personally just never even waste like actual rounds on this vehicle, because like, imagine if you kill a Scorpion with your actual gun. So you kill him, and then here comes like a T-29 or T-30 or something like that around the corner. Like, you'd rather have your main gun, right? So for Scorpions, just MG them on the right side. Easy kill every single time. And then finally, our last vehicle for America on the actual 6.7 vehicles, which is the M50 Ontos. The Ontos is very special because it has multiple shots, which means that if you go like around a corner or something, it can just spray you with like a shotgun. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Personally, for me at least, I don't ever use the Ontos. I don't really think it's particularly that great of a vehicle. I'm not a fan of the 105 recoilless anyway, so like, it's still just like an easy vehicle to kill. I've never seen people struggle with this vehicle. It only has 2 crews, so if you just shoot directly through the front, even if you just have an AP round, it will destroy both of the crew because they're very, very, very close together. But yeah, that's the M50 Ontos. The only thing that you really have to know about is that it can shoot multiple times, which for some people is a little bit of a bad thing. I guess another thing to note is that like, you can destroy one gun barrel and it destroys all of them. So if you do have to gun them out for some reason, just shoot one of the barrels and it will destroy them. So that's just what to see on the Ontos. But overall, very, very easy vehicle to kill. All right, so before we move over to Germany, I do want to show up this weak spot if you have enough pin for it for the T29, T30, and T34, is that you can actually shoot right here, like with the 90mm on the Jackson. You can shoot right there and it can actually pin and it can destroy the whole thing. So that's something to know if you ever want to go for it. It is a weak spot you can technically go for. It's kind of hard to hit though, but it is one to definitely know. All right, so now we're on to Germany, and first we're starting off with the Tiger 2P. which is a vehicle that has a pretty easy weak spot to just shoot for, which is just going to be right there. Like the whole entire turret itself really isn't that strong. It's probably the most reliable spot to go for is just the right side turret, but you can also go for a shot like right here. I know it's kind of like, why would you do that if the like turret itself is pretty like easy to hit? But sometimes people do try to angle these vehicles, and like if you shoot right there, for example, it can be a harder like actual shot to take. So just realize that you do have the little side of the cupola if for some reason they're trying to angle with their Tiger. But overall, the Tiger 2P is one of those vehicles that's very easy to actually just take out. So next we're looking at the Tiger 2H, and this is a vehicle that I would probably say is a vehicle for the 90mm at least, a vehicle that you need APCR for. Yes, you can pin them. Like, let me preface this right now. You can pin them with your APHE. The only problem around it is that it's a very small weak spot on the right side of the turret, which is what you're trying to shoot for. You're trying to shoot for the actual periscope that the gunner uses to shoot through. So if you can get a shot right there, like as you just seen, it can pin. Now we do have like a messed up Tiger, so I might need to like reset him. I hate this bug so much. Let's see, let me reset it. Okay, so yeah, as you can see, you can pin them, which is something that you need to know. You do not need APCR, but is way more reliable. Like let's just say if we go here, you're not pinning. Now if we switch over to APCR, which is on the majority of the 90mm that you'll see, especially on the Persians and stuff like that, since the ammo is directly in the back of the turret itself, most of the time it's going to cook off. So it is very much, and this is like one of the only vehicles, like the Jumbo 75 and then the Persians, and anything with this 90mm that has APCR, at least bring like 2 to 4 rounds, because it is so much easier to destroy Tigers whenever the weak spot is the whole entire turret instead of just the little bitty like gunner's cupola or the gunner's like periscope. It's so much easier to take these guys out whenever it comes to having APCR. So that's definitely one thing that you need to know. But if you do have your APHE loaded and you just randomly come across a Tiger from the front, just aim for this little bitty spot right here and you will be able to pin. So that's how you take out the Tiger 2s. And now let's get on to the Ferdinand and as well as the Elephant. So both of these vehicles are very similar. The only thing about the Ferdinand and the Elephant is that they're pretty much immune to 90s, 75, 76s from the front. Like, you can't really pin them within the turret themselves. You do have some slight weak spots, so I'm not sure if I can get this one hit. Like, you can go for that right there if you really wanted to. But it's also worthy to say that you do have APCR. So hopefully bring some. And if you ever see a vehicle like this, instead of trying to go for that like goofy little small weak spot, you can just shoot directly through this tank, and it is way easier to take something out whenever you can just pin it. Like APCR, some people do give it a lot of like discredit, but whenever you see a vehicle like this and you don't have APCR, it is definitely one of those like scary moments because you can pin them actually. So you can go directly for the ammo. I'm just showing like if you hit the crew though. Now, for the Ferdinand and the Elephant, if you are on the side of them, and whenever the APHE change comes to the game where we're actually getting more pin pass through of them, this spot right here, which is the one that's a little bit angled, is going to be way deadlier whenever it comes to Warthunder. Right now, whenever you shoot this, your APHE most likely will just fuse, but in the future, whenever you pin this, it will go through the engine, go through the transmission, and actually destroy some of the gunner crew in the back. So it's just going to be a better shot to take, but you do have those spots from the front. Overall though, I would not recommend going for the frontal plate at all, just because of how much armored it is compared to the other like parts of it. You do have on the Elephant though a little bit more weak spot if we use APCR. Like see, even on the APCR, the frontal plate is definitely not one that I would go for. But the big difference between the Ferdinand and the Elephant is that you actually have a weak spot on the front, which is this little bitty MG port right there. Once again, it's probably like super hard to hit, so like I wouldn't recommend going for it. I mean, as you see, it got the machine gunner there, but if I were you, just load a APCR and then shoot it in the actual like turret in the back and just pin the gunner and then kill the crew. Basically the easiest way to destroy these vehicles. Alright, so now we're looking at the Jagdtiger, which is a vehicle I would say that only has like one weak spot that you can go for with APHE, which is going to be the MG port in the front. Majority of the time, I would just say to switch over to your APCR, even on vehicles like the T29, like even that gun, to switch to APCR with that vehicle as well. And then you can just go through the flat turret, which is very easy to pin with APCR. You'll be able to get gunner loader, and after you get that, you just like switch sides, shoot these guys, get the commander loader, and then just wait until you see the gun start moving a slight bit again, and then shoot the guy. Or well, you could even just like load an APHE and go for the actual MG port. But APCR is going to be the most reliable way to kill the Yag Tiger whenever it comes to shooting them. You can go for ammo, you can go for that, but most of the time with APCR, just because of the spalling, I like to at least get the crew out, and then maybe you can go a little bit lower and shoot for the ammo that sits there. But it really depends on just how the engagement is going. If it's the only dude there, you can definitely take your time and just like snipe the crew and everything. But at the same time, that is probably the most reliable way to take out the Yag Tiger, especially in like a 5.7. Like if you're even like in a jumbo 76, the Yag Tiger is a very strong opponent. You may need to gun breach them or like shoot out their gun. So definitely is something to know about. Now we're on to the last two vehicles for Germany, and this one is just the M41 Bulldog. It really doesn't need any like weak spot to actually like talk about. Like the whole tank itself is just a weak spot. Like that's APCR, just destroys it. But one thing that you can do if you do have like a 50 cal, or you have like, let's just say you have IS-2 with the Dishka or something like that, is that the turret ring of Walker Bulldogs is actually pretty lightly armored, which means that you can actually shoot in here. Like we got the loader already, and we might get the turret ring, and we might get other things. But what you can do is you can like give a hope and a prayer that you actually like destroy something within that, and then he's not able to destroy you, especially if they shoot out your gun or something like that. That's the only really big thing that I would say you need to know about Walker Bulldogs. All right, so now we have our final vehicle, which is the SPZ 12-3 LGS. This is a battle pass vehicle. You probably won't ever see these vehicles that much. It has a 106 on top, and it also has a 20mm cannon. Just so you know, like it is very hard to HE these things. Like I know some people like to shoot the HE at the 106 to top. For me at least, it's very, very hard to actually get it to overpressure or anything like that unless you have like an insanely huge HE. So if they're like hiding and they're trying to like just use the gun because it's a little bit higher than the tank, I would honestly just shoot out the 106 and then try to get on the side of it or something to try to get closer to it, because you're not going to really do much. But overall, this vehicle doesn't have quite much to it. It's very, very easy to kill. So now we're in the M10. Yeah, it's definitely an M10. Definitely not a Panther. It's a Panther if you didn't know, but it's a transmog of an M10. But the vehicle itself is the Panther 75. So we have the 75 that you'll see within a lot of the vehicles around this battle rating whenever it comes to Germany. So definitely one that we need to look at. But now we're looking at Russia, and it's going to be most of their heavy tanks. So I did make a video going over all of the heavy tanks of Russia. So if you want to see that video, it'll be like at the time card at the top right now. But also remember this, is that most of these vehicles are within the Chinese tech tree as well. And we do have the Chinese Type 62 right there. So most of these vehicles are going to apply the same with China as well. So the first vehicle we have here is the Object 248. It's a vehicle which has the 100mm instead of the 122 that the IS-2 has. So it's a slight bit different, it has a quicker reload, but overall it's the exact same whenever it comes to majority of the armor values of the Russian heavies. Like the only way that you can really tell that the difference is you look at the muzzle brake. If there's no muzzle brake, then it's the Object 248, and then also the cupola on the top is on the left instead on the right if you're looking at it from this point of view. So whenever you're trying to kill these things, you can shoot them in the lower plate if you really do want to. That is an easy spot to kill them. You can also shoot them where I prefer to shoot them, which is in this area right in here, which will be able to pin them and destroy most of the crew. And then also, if you really, really, really need to, you can go for the cupola on top, which should do a decent amount of damage. It's just that this vehicle, which is the Panther's gun, isn't really suited for doing a lot of damage like that. So it's something that you can go for. It's most likely just going to get the commander with like the Panther gun, so I would recommend just going for those areas. You can go for the turret itself though, which is another one that you can go for if you can only see the turret, which is the little side skirts right there. Now the next one here is the IS-2. Has the exact same armor as that one, so you can go for lower plate if you really want to. You can go for that area right here, and then you can go for turret, and you can also go for cupola, but once again it's a Panther gun, so it doesn't have a ton of HE filler, so you're not going to have a ton of spalling. The only differences between the IS-2 and then the IS-2 144 or the 1944 is the hull. The turret itself basically is the same. You can still pin there. There's not really a huge amount of difference, but the things that you really don't want to go for on this vehicle is the hull itself. You can go for the lower plate still with at least a Panther gun, but majority of the upper hull where I was shooting before is no longer a spot you can technically go for. It's going to bounce because of the angle of the hull now, which to me at least is why I would never go for the hull anymore on this. I would go directly for the turret pretty much every time now, because that's going to be the easiest way to kill the IS-2 1944. Now, the next one we have here is the T-44, and I feel like the T-44 is one of those vehicles that people just make a huge mistake on, and they feel like it doesn't have enough armor, and they try to like shoot it right there, and then they don't pen, and then they do no damage to it. The T-44 though has a super weak turret, and that's what you need to shoot for pretty much every single time. If you can get around to just go into this weak turret, it's going to basically be a one-shot every time. Like, it's not that hard to actually hit it. I think it's a very, very easy like tank to take out. It's just, I don't know why some people just get confused and like try to shoot for the upper plate, or they like try to shoot for like different areas and they just like miss. Like, this whole upper plate is just like, don't shoot here. Like, literally don't shoot here. You can shoot for lower plate, you can shoot for the turret, and it's a very, very easy vehicle to take out. And then finally we have here the Type 62. Please learn what a Type 62 is, and then learn what a T-54 is. I've seen so many people over like playing War Thunder just making videos on this game where for some reason they think this thing is a T-54. It is not a T-54. Please learn the differences, because this vehicle, if you think it's a T-54, will just ruin your day. Because instead of like going for a weak spot shot, you can just do this to it. It has no armor. The Type 62 is so easy to take out. Please just learn the differences between the T-54 and this thing, because it's so easy to determine what you need to do to a Type 62 is just shoot it from the front and it will basically pin everywhere. But yeah, that's Russia. If you want to see a more in-depth guide for them whenever it comes to their heavy tanks, I do have a video on that, so make sure to check that out. All right, so now what we're doing is we're looking at the UK lineup for their 6.7, and to be quite honest, it's not that great. The only vehicle that you have that's particularly any good is the Centurion Mark II, and the rest of these vehicles are honestly pretty weak. The Rattle 20's problem is that all the crew is combined in the center right there, so if you just shoot there, you basically hit all of the crew. Like, it really isn't that hard to do. The only thing that you really have to know is this is probably one of the lower battle ratings where you have ATGMs that are actually guided by the mouse. So that's a little bit iffy to deal with, but overall you can just destroy these things very, very easily, and you can also just HE them. The next vehicle we have here is the G6 Rhino, which this vehicle I think is one of those vehicles that people just shoot wrong and then it survives. So if you shoot the G6 Rhino like right there, the only thing that you're taking out is the driver itself, and they can still shoot for you. I personally would never go for the like lower portion of the tank. I would always just shoot up here, and well, that's an HE, I messed up, but I would always just shoot up into the turret itself and then destroy most of the turret crew, because as you can see, that shot right there only took out the driver. But if you shoot up in here, all the crew is basically just sitting up in there, which is a very, very easy kill for you. Now you can HE them. It's kind of a difficult shot to hit, because you have to hit about like right in here, and if you can do that, it goes through and it HEs the rest of the crew. Now the next vehicle we have here is the Centurion Mark II, and this vehicle is one of those vehicles that if you have a powerful enough gun like a long 88, or you have something that can pin this upper hole, you can shoot for it. The thing about it is, whenever you're in an up tier, most vehicles will not be able to shoot this upper hole and actually pin it. So the thing that you have to do is you have to either do one thing is go for the lower hole, which most things can actually pin, or you have to go for the turret ring itself. Because the Centurion Mark II, while it's not that heavily armored whenever you look at it, it's heavily armored compared to like 5.7 vehicles. But like if you're at 6.7, this thing is very, very easy to kill. But if you're at 5.7, you have that lower plate, and then also you have the turret ring that you can go for. I wouldn't really try to go for like the turret cheeks, or go for the upper of the turret, or even like go for like this position right here, because most likely you're not going to pin. So either lower hole or go for the turret ring. That's the two spots that I would pick on this Centurion Mark II. Now we have the Tortoise, and this one's probably one of those vehicles you guys are going to be upset about, because, well, you can just do that to it. And it's a Tortoise, it goes boom, and it basically has no armor. So if you're in a 5.7 and somehow you meet a Tortoise and you have APHE, you can just shoot there and destroy it majority of the time. You do have other little bitty weak spots, like if you're in the long 88, you can technically like shoot here and it will pin. Maybe with the APCR we can actually go through with the 85mm. But there's a lot of other different spots if they ever do take away the cupola spot up there. So maybe APCR can pin that. No, APCR is not tough on this thing. But yeah, that's where I would go for pretty much every time. It's not really worth going for the other weak spots. You do have this other one, which I'm not sure if this 85 can pin. Yeah, I wouldn't particularly go for it. Yeah, just go for the cupola if you're 5.7 and you see a Tortoise within Warthunder. All right, so I'm not particularly sure why it spawned multiple Japanese vehicles. I'm not sure. Like, I don't really know what caused this, but we're still going to do the testing anyway because most of these Japanese vehicles, they just don't have any armor. Like, you have the SCA-3, the Type 61, the Type 60 ATM, Type 60, and then also the Hori prototype, which is probably the only vehicle that's ever going to give you any, like, scariness whenever it comes to his armor, because most of these vehicles can just be pinned. We're in the mutant tank, they like to call it, the Sherman, which has the 90 mil, and basically you can just do that every time to them. Like, you can just upper frontal plate them, it destroys them. There's nothing really that you have to be worrisome about. Like, the only thing that you really have to worry about with STA3 is the autoloader. This one, the Type 61, doesn't have an autoloader, it's manually loaded, so you can technically be a little bit safer around this thing for the reload. But that's really all that you need to know about these two vehicles. They're very, very similar when it comes to armor. They can't really take a shot. They can be a little bit bouncy just depending on where you shoot them, but yeah, overall, they're very similar to like what a Walker Bulldog's armor is, like when it comes to actually pinning them. It's not really that hard to actually take them out. Now, the next vehicles we have here are the wonderful Type 60 ATM, which if you destroy this tank, you're a bully, and then also the Type 60. Both of these vehicles can be HE'd. It's actually kind of funny. For Type 60, you can just shoot directly in the front, but if you do want to load a HE, you can just HE these guys, and you can just say that, haha, you're a bully. You can also use your 50 cal. So like, let's just say that you want to get rid of their ATGMs, you can do that to them. And then if you want to HE them, well, you can't do that because you shoot directly through it because it's the destroyed ATGM. But let me show you the most reliable spot to ATG them, which is just right here. Kills all three of those guys. But yeah, you can just shoot the little like MG, the MG like gun mantley right there with the 50 cal. And yeah, it just HEs everything in that vicinity. Alright, yeah, they're not really that big of an issue, to be quite honest with you. And then, yeah, you can 50 cal them as well. It's not really that big of a deal. Alright, so the actual vehicle that's going to give you, like, any bit of problem, which is the Hori prototype. Now, a lot of people make this huge mistake with the Hori prototype. And that is that they go for the gun breach instead of going for this area right here. This area right here, you can actually pin. The gun breach area is actually stronger. It's kind of backwards compared to how most vehicles that are like casemate tank destroyers are, because you can shoot right here and it's not going to pin. But for most vehicles, you would think, well, it's the breach, right? It should be like the weakest part of armor. That's untrue. It's this area right in here. So I would always go for that area, never go for the breach itself, and it's such an easy tank to take out. You can, if you have to make the shot, you can shoot through like the little radiator thing, as you see at the top right there, and still go through. This whole entire area is a weak spot for the prototype, which I think is just easy to take them out. Just don't shoot for the breach, whatever you do, because it's not a weak spot whenever it comes to this tank. Next, we have the only Chinese tank that's like different that we needed to actually go over, and it's just the ZSL-92. It's a SPA. Well, you can just MG it. It's not that hard to do anything with. It's nothing really like great about it. I believe you could probably even 50 cal it from the top up here. Maybe not. I was thinking that you could maybe hit the ammo, but yeah, overall this thing has no armor. And then we're on to Italy, which Italy has a little bit of a different vehicles. You have the Obel, and then you have the Fiat. Both of these vehicles are just like almost recoilless rifle tanks. Like this one is a recoilless rifle right there. You can just pin it, you can HE it, you can probably 50 cal it and destroy it pretty much every time. Same thing with the Obel. Like, yeah, you can just 50 cal these guys. Like, they're not that huge of a tank to engage. Next, we're on to France, and France has some cool vehicles, I guess. They have the EBR, the 1954, AMX-13, AMX-13 SS-11, and then the AMX M4. All these other vehicles, like, they're not really going to give you much issue. They don't really have that much armor. Like, if you can get a shot right there, it's a GG for that guy. The AMX-13, I would honestly try to not go for the hull, because, well, yes, like, even though I'm going to shoot it right here, it's probably going to destroy it. Sometimes, and it's not all the time, I have had it where the engine just completely denies all of the APHE effect within the tank. So, whenever I see an AMX-13, I normally just go for the actual turret itself, and it should do enough damage. And then you have this vehicle, which is just got ATGMs on it. You can 50 cal these guys, and it should destroy them. So that's like the easiest way to kill this guy. Like, you can even shoot this, it destroys them. I personally don't like this AMX-13 just because of that fact. And then finally, which is probably one of the like most dominant vehicles at 6.7 right now, which is AMX M4. AMX M4 Just don't go for that. Go for the turret on all the AMXs. It gets rid of all of the fear of AMX tanks with a Warthunder whenever you just go for the turret of these guys. Because you have vehicles like the Samua, you have vehicles like the AMX M4, which are kind of a little bit rough to actually destroy. So if you just go for the turret, very easy kills pretty much every time. And that's what I would do for the AMX M4. Never go for the hull, just go for the turret every single time. Now we're on to Sweden, the baguette cannon is like they call it. It's probably like biggest issue. Like I wouldn't really say it's a particularly like good tank, but it's probably like biggest issue is that like you can pin it and it doesn't like diffuse APHU. Well, yes, you see right there, it fused it and it destroyed it. It's very easy to take out. That's what I would recommend doing. Like, yes, you can technically go for the top of the tank right here, like where I'm about to shoot, and sometimes get it to pin and sometimes ammo rack it, but I would just go for the sides of the turret. Maybe it takes you like 2 shots to kill these guys, but it's very much worth doing that instead of giving him a chance to shoot at you and destroy you. So just go for that areas of the tank. To me, at least, that's the easiest way to go for it. Destroy the crew, get it to where he can't shoot. Shoot just like 2 shells into him, and then you can kill them. I mean, like, it's one of those things. I don't highly recommend ever going for this like sort of area with the Gillette cannon or the cannon, whatever you want to call this thing. But yeah, very easy to kill. And then finally, our biggest meme, Zaclam Tega. If you have any trouble killing this thing, uninstall. Alright, so I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Remember that we'll be looking onto the future videos whenever it comes to the 6-7 vehicles with Warthunder. As we know, as you can see right here, there's a ton of 6-7 vehicles within the game, and the 7-7 video should be out pretty soon after this one comes out. So hope everyone has a wonderful day. We'll see you guys in the next Warthunder video.